Today we're going to talk about tendinitis in your knees, but first I need to make coffee and walk dogs, so we'll get that done. About 8 months ago, I started developing tendinitis in my knees. Yes, you're about to go on a walk. This little Mardy one, desperate to go. Not yet. So as I was saying, about 8 months ago, I developed tendinitis in my knees. Both knees at the same time doing front squats. So today I'm going to go through how I sort of remedied it, and if you are struggling with tendinitis in your knees, what you could do to try and make things a bit better. But like I said, got to walk these munchkins first, and then we're getting in the garage. Cool. So step one to try and sort out tendinitis for me was trying to diagnose why I was getting the issue, and it came down to me for two reasons. So one was technique. I was pushing my knees out too wide, which was putting undue torque on my knee, which put more pressure into the tendons than needed, and the volume that I was training was number two. So I addressed both of those issues first. Volume, I went from squatting 4 times a week and Olympic lifting 6 times a week to dropping that volume down to squatting days to being 3 times a week, and then I would have at least 1 day of my training days where I wouldn't go below parallel. So it would be like a power clean day or a power snatch day. Once I'd figured out why I was getting tendinitis in my knees, I then started to learn why tendinitis happens and how it develops. So tendinitis is basically the tendons being irritated, which makes them inflamed, which then makes them painful whilst you're doing movement. So they're not damaged as such, they're just irritated. You can still train through tendinitis, you just need to be smart how you do it. So that's where my approach to training changed slightly. To help with tendinitis, you want time under tension in the muscle. So loading, for me, I dropped significantly. So I did quite a few weeks where I was doing low weight squats, really slow and controlled, working on tempo and controlling the movement. And then the second thing I did was added in reverse Nordics. So a reverse Nordic isn't a very difficult movement, and it's one that you can sort of adapt to your skill level. So for me, when I first started getting the pain, it was really simple. I would sit on my knees and I would just sit up and down. So I'm activating the quad here, but I can do it in a really slow and controlled tempo where I'm activating the quad, I'm going through its full range of motion, but I'm making sure that I'm in control of the movement. So then I would start every session by doing sort of a set of 10 of these where I would just be sitting up and down on my feet. I would then move my feet apart so I'm in more of my squat stance, which means I'm getting a bit more flexion into the quads, into the tendon. And then when I start to feel a bit more warmed up, then I start to add in torso angle. So leaning back with it and trying to maintain that angle. And then now I've built up the strength there, I can lean all the way back flat and come all the way back up again. Okay, so maintaining tension through the full quad, through the range of motion, not trying to compensate by changing the angle, and again doing it in a really controlled manner. Another thing I realised was that I wasn't warming up properly, so I started to implement skipping a lot more in my warm-ups. I find this is a great way to activate the quads because it's doing sort of a plyometry movement, but I can change the tempo of it so I can speed up or I can slow down to really focus on the loading that I'm doing, and it also warms me up nicely for any of my Olympic lifts afterwards. So I started to implement using massage gun a little bit more, so depending on how the warm-up felt, if I could feel any tightness, any extra sort of pulling around that knee, then I would then use sort of the gun up the leg and around to try and loosen off that area, which normally helped quite a lot with relieving the pressure on the tendon, because if all my quads are tight, then that's going to put extra force through the tendon, whereas these are a lot looser. Then it's going to mean that 1, they can work better in their contraction, and 2, they're not putting constant pressure on the tendon, which then makes the pain go away, which is what we want. I'm going to do that now. To go along with loosening things off by using the gun, I then added in more dynamic stretching. which you can count the reverse Nordics kind of as a dynamic stretch, but this is more what I mean. So like world's greatest stretch, but we're not holding a position, but we are working through different ranges of motion. Although this is a hip stretch, if I can reduce the tension in my hips, which I have quite a lot of, then it should reduce the overall tension through other areas in my body, such as my knees. So doing this sort of thing at the start of the session really helps with the overall effect of the session. I also found lifters were actually making things worse, so they were putting more pressure on my knees from making my knees track further forwards. So I took them out of my training for a little bit, but they are useful. I like wearing them, so I built them back into my training and still have no issues now that I've fixed other areas, which is what we're going to look at now. So previously when I squatted very knees out, so I'd track very far out when I was squatting up and down, and that put excess torque on my knees, and it's also put a load of excess torque on my hips over the years, so I have a lot of issues with my hips that I'm still working through. But now I try and squat more knees over toes, so I'm squatting more straight up and down with less knee track out. And this is a habit that I developed from lots of years of CrossFit, of where I'd always get told, push your knees out. So that's what I learned. I'd learned how to push my knees out in my squat. And as a result of that, I've then ended up with a load of other issues. So it's not push your knees out, it's track your knees over your toes. So always make sure when you are squatting, you're allowed a little bit of in or a little bit of out, depending on where your hips are built. Just make sure you try to track toes, not just going, oh, knees out, any which way. More recently as well, I've started to have a change in my tempo when I squat, which I think's helping as well. So this is helping with other issues as well as my knees. Trying to make sure when I'm squatting down, I'm squatting with control. So this allows me to think of my positioning a lot more and be in control of the bar, and then being explosive on the way up. I think this has helped massively because it's doing that controlled time under tension, which is what your tendons like, and then working on the explosive force, which is what the force production likes that we need for weightlifting. So I'm going to start building up my squat, ready for our working sets today. I'm getting into our working sets now, so we're doing 3 lots of 7 at 156 kilos. So one of the things that I changed was upping volume over weight. What helps with that is following a new squat cycle that's worked really well in the past, and just sticking to that, which focuses a bit more on volume over the load. So this is, I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head, 70 something, like 78% maybe. So it's not super duper heavy, but works on volume, which really helps with sort of managing the tendon pain instead of just overloading constantly, because the temptation is always to go really heavy, because I like going heavy. It's the whole reason why I do this sport. But you do have to be sensible about it sometimes. So let's get into the first working set. One down, 2 to go. So we're going to try and keep the speed that we had on the first few reps from that last set through the whole thing. That's the plan, that's the goal. See how that goes. I felt better, happy with that. So on this last set, just try and maintain the same intensity that I had on the previous set. So keeping that speed the whole way through. I did not feel like I maintained the intensity. That felt a lot harder, that set. Like tendinitis anywhere, it's very easy to just say, oh, I'll just train through it, I'll push through it, it'll get better in the long run. And believe me, I've done that with my hips and it doesn't get better in the long run. When I started developing tendinitis in my knees, well, when I got to the point where I had fully developed tendinitis in my knees, I knew I needed to make a difference. It's very easy to just say, we'll just train through it and see what happens. But when you start to feel the signs, that's your time to act. Because if it takes too long, then it just gets worse and worse and worse and builds up. And it takes ages to try and fix, which is what's happened with my hips, and which I'm still dealing with issues with my hips now, for trying to make them less painful when I squat. I've made huge improvements in my hips, but I don't want my knees to go that way as well, because otherwise I will be falling apart. Because for me, my whole objective with this Olympic weightlifting is to do it for as long as possible, to try and push for as long as possible, so that I have the opportunity to try and go to some international competitions. So long term, the goal is Commonwealth Games. 2026, that's the target, but if it doesn't happen in 2026, then I'll do it in 2030. So I need to make sure that I can keep training for that long, so that I've got the option to say in 2030, yeah, I'm going to the Commonwealth Games. When I train, my goal is always to train smart. I train hard, but I want to train smart, because for me, injury prevention is the way to improve in the long run. Like, I could do a squat cycle that lasts 4 weeks, but then only gain 5 kilos in my squat and mess up my knees or hips that much that I then can't squat for 4 weeks afterwards and lose all the gains that I made. So if I can continue to squat well, without pain, without injury, then for me, that's a win. But time for the clean jerks. So we're going to do like 2 reps of 1 clean and jerk from the blocks, so I can work on my catch position in the clean. So we'll get that started. One of the biggest benefits of having the tempo whilst I'm doing the back squats is that it then means that when I'm doing these squats, I'm not having high impact on my knees when I'm doing my cleans and my snatches, as well as when I'm doing like my back squats and front squats. It gives my knees a chance to have control over the contraction, instead of with like cleans where you are just catching in that bottom position. So it's just a load of impact at the bottom. Helps build up the tension, helps build up the tendon strength and tolerance if I do the back squats controlled, so when I do these, I don't have any issues. On my cleans, I'm trying to work on catching further back, because I have a tendency to catch forwards, which is where my chest collapses and then makes it hard to stand up the squat. So I'm trying to catch more in my heels so that my back doesn't collapse to compensate for where the weight is. So it makes it easy to stand up. So that's what we're trying to do here. Make sure I stand up with purpose every time. That's another thing we're trying to work on. So many things to work on. Never ending list. That was a rubbish clean, but a best split jerk. I needed to chalk up. My bad. Right, we're going up to our working weight, so we're going to do 3 lots of 2 at 130, and then build up to a comfortably heavy for the day of a single. Just squat like that. Like, why can't I just squat like that every time? But no, I have to. Don't even have to move my feet. That's it. If you haven't noticed from the sound of my voice, I'm slightly ill. That was the first set, or first rep, that I felt that tiredness from being ill kick in. When I was demoing the Nordics at the start, I got a cramp in my hamstring. Oh my god, my hamstring decided to cramp up then. Perfect demo. I can still freaking feel it. Right here. It's right pain in the ass.
Jumps come off. Get serious now. That moved better, was good. Happy with that one. That's set, and then we're going to build to a comfortably heavy for the day. Lovely stuff. Nearly went into blackout territory there. We are going up to 150 for a bit of funsies. My bracing is all over the shop. It's just making me go lightheaded. Gone for another 10 kilo jump again, just for funsies, just to see how we're feeling at the moment. I'm gonna try again. Oh, it's really annoying that I'm missing jerks. Oh well, we got the clean. So 160 is the cap, but we'll work through it. Didn't clutch the squat amazingly, but felt alright standing it up. So that's good. But I did tweak some little things then on the way up then, in just how I was treating the contact point. Changed it to a bit like Rackman's clean, so where it's more of a scoop and pop instead of an all-in-one. So might start diving that in a little bit. So what was interesting about that last clean was it showed how I used to squat. So it's what I'm trying to work on to get out of, but old habits die hard and it comes out again when I clean. It's one of the things that I'm trying to work on, but I haven't been heavy in a while on clean, so I'm going to have a chance to see what happens when I go heavy, and apparently my knees go miles apart. So hopefully if I can work on that, then that'll help me a lot as well, because it's not how I squat, so it's making standing up the squats harder. So hopefully if I can fix that, then standing up the squats will be easier and I'll be able to lift more, ideally, but we'll have to wait and see. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Hope you learned a little bit about tendinitis and how I've dealt with it in the past. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit that subscribe and like, comment, all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. I'm doing a bonus one to come out on myself. Squat. Behind, not wide. Behind. Shouldn't have done the bonus one. Got it on myself.